Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Do you have a notepad? Do you have a pen? If not, grab those now because I want you to take notes. I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you'll jot down some sort of action item, something that you can implement in your business today. Let's get started. Recently, I was involved in a discussion which motivated me to share the benefits of and explain the concept of a business MVP. That's right, MVP. And I'm not talking about the most valuable player. Perhaps you think of your MVP as that team member which is most valuable. Maybe that sales team member who's making the lion's share of the sales. That's a different type of MVP. I want to talk to you today about the minimum viable product. Have you heard this concept before? This goes back to the early days of Silicon Valley and is most often associated with, at least originally, and I think still most often associated with tech startups and information technology companies. However, this concept is very useful for all types of business, and you can get something out of this regardless of who you are and what your business is. So think of this as a concept that'll help to guide you if you are considering getting into business or if you're considering adding more product offerings and services to the market, or if you're just innovating and you're trying to consider the viability of your existing business. Let's pause and think for a moment why not everyone is in business. Is that something that you've ever thought about? Why isn't everybody in business for themselves? Why doesn't everybody scratch that entrepreneurial itch? And the answer should be obvious, and that is it's the risk involved. And what are we risking when we get in business? We're risking the expenditure of resources with insufficient return or inadequate return on our investment. And so think about that. What are the resources? Your time, and often is the case that you'll spend a lot of money, and there are other things that you want to be sure that if you're going to spend the energy, the time, the money, that you're getting sufficient return on that investment. And people don't always feel comfortable with that notion. And so when you're exploring this idea and you think, well, I kind of think I'd like to be in business, or I think I've got a good idea, or I've got a new idea that I'd like to add to my business, then this concept of the minimum viable product may be really helpful for you to consider. Think of this as the introduction of a prototype with the minimum expenditure and deployment of resources in order to deliver to the early adopters. So with that conservative resource expenditure, you're trying to assess the adoption, the acceptance, the use of those early adopters. Think of it as a way of, presenting your vision on a small scale to those people who are forward thinking, not to the masses. You're not trying to appeal to everyone at this point. You're trying to appeal to those that get it, who are really looking for this product or service, looking for this solution that your product or service solves, but you're doing it, the key here is, with a very conservative expenditure of resources. That's where the concept of minimum comes in. You want to be minimalist in your approach of investment into this, to try to think of it as a sneak peek of your vision. And the primary goal at this point is to elicit feedback from the market, from those early adopters. Try to get ideas for improvement based on getting the early stage, that pilot project, that beta version, or that prototype out there. This is an excellent means through which you as an entrepreneur can get early feedback. It's a great feedback mechanism from the market to give you ideas for innovation and improvement at the early stages of product development. As you continue to invest resources, you get this escalating commitment. And this is a great way of mitigating against the escalation commitment escalation that occurs as you continue to put more resources in a project. You don't want to try to perfect something before getting it to the market. We understand that perfection is elusive and it's really something that you'll never accomplish. And so when we accept that, we think, okay, well, what is the minimum viable product? What can I put out there that I can use and it'll appeal to certain parts of the market, those early adopters, and they will give me the feedback that I can use to really develop the product, which will then appeal to a greater and greater share of the market. So you should consider using this concept, this MVP, minimum viable product concept, as a way of systematically testing small variations in your product or service and then adjusting according to the market feedback that you get. You know, it's supposed to be like science. You know, you don't want to change too many variables at once. And when you're developing a product or service from the get-go, what you end up doing is you make a lot of assumptions, and maybe you talk to your friends or those stakeholders are very close to you who are involved, and you can have this confirmation bias where you think all your ideas are great and you continue to pour resources into the development of your product or service, your idea, without getting any feedback. So again, think of it like science. Like, you're going to put it out there and you're going to test and experiment and add this and change that based on what the real users, the real market users are doing and what feedback they are giving you. You know, I mentioned that concept of the escalating commitment, and I think that there's plenty of examples in the marketplace of how particular companies maybe introduced a new concept, a new product or service to the marketplace, but they did so after such a major investment that they were really committed to pursuing that original concept. Now, this may not be a fair example, but I think the company was called Quibi. And this was like a short form streaming service that was supposed to be launched a couple of years ago, and it didn't. They raised the better part of $2 billion. I think $1.75 billion. They had all sorts of celebrity endorsements and lots of celebrities attached to this project, and it was supposed to be the next greatest thing, and it had great leadership. The president and one of the founders were people who'd done really well in the entertainment industry before. I mean, big names running the company. Everything was going in its direction, but so much poured in. And then, you know, you could argue the various reasons of why it didn't, and there's entire, I think, blog posts and videos that have been dedicated to that concept. But what I would say is there's an example of pouring all your resources in and then trying to convince people of the need to pivot based on and change and adapt to what the market is saying and feeding back. It's like, there's that huge escalating commitment. It's like, well, we've got so many resources dedicated to doing it this way. Is it likely that we're going to pivot and do something another way? The minimum viable product concept hedges against that. It's the same with another example. I'm not sure if this is really a good example, but Blockbuster, they had so much in. Now that's not an example of a new product offering. That's why this might be a bad example. But the concept of the escalating commitment, there's so much involved once you keep pouring resources into a particular business model, a particular product or service, that is very difficult for management to make the decision to change. Well, in contrast to that, whether those were good examples or not, Quibi and Blockbuster, in contrast to that, the concept of the MVP is that you are putting forth the minimum investment. And the concept of minimal again, is to minimize your risk. And then you are much more nimble, much more willing to adjust and make those scientific changes that the market is feeding back. And then you can continually do that as you continue to pour in resources that the market's giving you feedback. Now you have sort of a proof of concept and you continue to adjust. I want to reiterate that you shouldn't think of this as just for technology-based ideas, products, or services. This can be applicable to anything, really, to any product or service. And when you're introducing a product or service, an idea to the market, there are so many factors that matter. Like, think about the geographical location. You may be able to take a great idea and then you launch it in the wrong market, in the wrong geographical location, and it just doesn't, for whatever reason, culturally, or there might be, you know, if you're launching a franchise of tanning salons in Miami, they might not be as popular as somewhere in a northern climate that doesn't get as much natural sunlight. Just geographical locations. I think of Red Bull as an example of a huge company that, you know, started with a product that was introduced in Thailand, and when the co-founder came and Dietrich, I forget his last name, but he came and it helped him cure his jet lag, and he really appreciated that energy drink, and it wasn't really a common thing where he'd come from, and he thought about what could this do outside of Thailand, where it already had great, well, it wasn't called Red Bull at the time, but he got together with the guy who invented the energy drink that he had tried, and they started releasing it in other geographical locations. And then, of course, there's a marketing genius story behind that as well. But it really started to take on. So think about your product or service, and is the geography maybe an issue? And have you got so much invested in one area that you think, oh, it didn't work, and the idea is dead? Whereas the minimum viable concept would allow you to test it perhaps in different geographical locations. Also, what about the target market? Maybe you decided in your idea, in your notion, you were going to address your product to a particular demographic, maybe male or female, or a particular age demographic, something like that, and you guessed wrong. Well, this scientific approach with the MVP concept allows you to try it again. You haven't invested so much, we'll try it again, maybe with a younger market and see what they have. I think about these non-fungible tokens that are out. NFTs right now are all the rage. And you know, this is not a new concept. It's a concept that's easily adopted by very young people who are used to gaming and in-game assets and that kind of stuff. So that idea of an NFT isn't too foreign to them. But another market, so, you know, a couple generations older, just shakes their head. And while I think that some of the early use cases of NFTs are ridiculous and will likely be bubbles that don't turn out so well to those investors, I think that there's a wonderful technology here that's going to be applicable throughout. And there's just another example about, well, it's an idea, it's a concept, and how can we apply it? And to what market, what geographical market, what age of market? Also, think about a concept that is proven in one area, and maybe you are just going to use it in a different industry. Maybe you are going to apply to a restaurant. A restaurant is not a new concept. I don't know how long restaurants have been around, but many, many years, many hundreds or thousands of years, there have been places publicly that you can go and get food, but maybe you've introduced some sort of change that's unique in terms of the process and how you deliver the food, how you serve the food, and this kind of thing. And it's unique in a particular market. Maybe it was very common in one area of the world and you introduced it somewhere else, but you did it with a minimum viable product concept. You did that in such a way that you tested it and you found out, ooh, it's catching on. Now you can start to adjust. Now you can see what your customers are feeding back to you, and again, continue to invest your resources. So that idea is, even if you are very confident and everyone you talk to says, oh, that's a great idea, you want to be careful. Don't invest everything into it. Many great ideas will fall flat based on some modification that might have been necessary, some little tweak, and timing is not the least of which is a very common thing, that it's just the wrong timing. People don't always know. That is to say, consumers don't always know what they want or need or what they should desire or value. Sometimes your idea, your product or service is so novel, it's so unique that it doesn't make sense to them. And the minimum viable product concept will allow you to have certain people come aboard and start to appreciate and build value in their mind for it. And now you can start to leverage that word of mouth and network effects where people start to use it and start to tell others, and then others are coming aboard and everybody is now agreeing. And at the same time, you continue to tweak based on their feedback, and you continue to invest more and more resources, and you're getting hopefully some revenue back because of this early feedback. There should also be revenues generated from that, maybe a little bit of profit, and you can reinvest that and build your product offering that way. You know, there's that concept of if we were trying to travel to Mars, or let's say to the moon, and you were off by just a very small margin, your trajectory was just slightly off. When you scale that over a long distance, you can be, thousands of miles. Maybe you're light years away from where you intended to go. So the same concept occurs here when if you go all in with all your resources and your ideas from the get-go without considering market feedback, and you were just slightly off, you were just guessing wrong a little bit, it's very risky. You can lose a lot. So give some thought to that. And this is a process. It's back and forth. Now, it should go without saying that what's required is the collection of data and then the analysis of that data. So you got to measure. We're constantly harping on this channel about the need to measure. So collect that data. You can't just introduce, a bare bone, a stripped down product and sit back and then say, okay, well, what do I do now? You've got to collect the data. You've got to have a strategic way of getting market feedback, analyzing it, discussing it both with all the stakeholders, especially with your consumers, but also with your internal team, and then tweaking from that. So there's lots of benefits from the MVP concept. And a few more benefits I think of is this idea that you get to make mistakes at a small scale. In our business, a couple things happened recently. We were working hard with a newer technology in our IT team, and it wasn't working out. And people involved were feeling really bad about this. And I said, no. This is, again, we're going to frame this through the lens of education. We're doing this at a small scale right now. And even though I don't like losing any money, there's a investment involved here that the education, if you just frame it through the eyes of the benefit of the education that we got, that is going to save us who knows how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars down the road as the businesses scale. And that's the way you should think of this kind of thing, is make your mistakes while your business is small, and then you get to add that to your experience, to your expertise and your knowledge, that you can now use that same foundational understanding of how business works, how whatever you learned, whatever concept you learned, how you can apply that at scale as your business grows. That's another benefit of the MVP. The minimum viable concept will also provide you the benefit of enabling your team to develop skills that they may not have entirely from the get-go. And as they are developing this product or service, they are also simultaneously developing experience that's going to pay off really well down the road. Some other things I think of is the first mover advantage. You might have this idea and you're like, oh boy, I need to get this. Someone else is going to think of this. This is really hot right now based on what's going on in the market or whatever, based on a new technology that another industry has released. I can now apply that and leverage that to my industry. So I need to make this change and put this out there. Well, the MVP allows you to do so and have that first mover advantage, that early mover advantage. And you got to be careful with everything I'm saying here. Of course, there's another side to the story here. If you release things too early and without enough refinement, it can actually be damaging to your brand. People might try it and think it's a total failure, and because you didn't invest enough. So there is a balancing act that comes there. But consider that idea of could you have an early or first mover advantage that is enabled through the minimum viable product concept? And can you build your brand commensurate to building the product offering? So maybe you release something to the market initially, and then you continue to listen to your customers, listen to the feedback from the market, you perpetually refine, you continually improve, you continually add value. Now you get this reputation among your consumers, your users, and they're like, this is a great brand, this is a great company. They're always adding more value, always adding more value. And if you added something from the beginning, let's say you had product A, B, or C, and you offered it for X, Y, or Z price, and it had a lot of investment in there, and your customers thought, yeah, this is pretty good or whatever. But now you're all in, and then trying to improve things is going to take some time because you've got so much invested into the R&D. Whereas with the minimum viable product concept, you're offering this, like I said, it's a bit of a stripped down base model, this sort of pilot project, this beta version, or this prototype. And then you are quickly adding, you're taking in that feedback from the customer, you're continually improving it. Now you're getting a reputation, and those same customers are seeing improvement constantly, and people like that. And that might add some loyalty and really help to build your brand alongside with the product offering building. Also, you can think of this as a way of adding sort of a core, a fundamental product around which you can build other products and services. So it may not be that you're refining too much the core product, but you're adding on, you have add-ons, so to speak. And again, for you to make this relevant to your business, you have to think about what it is and how you would use this concept. But people use the MVP concept to sort of say, well, here's the basic, here's the foundation, and now we have some more things that we can add on that as well. And that might not be that you refine the core product, so to speak, and raise the price or whatever. Maybe you have add-ons, and it allows you that time to develop those things, again, based on data collection, measurement, analysis. So there you have it in a nutshell. That's the idea of the MVP, and I hope that made sense to you. I really hope you should, I hope you will consider trying this. You should consider trying this to introduce your next innovation or your next product offering. If you're going to have a new product or service that enhances your business, innovates, drives extra value for your customers, consider if you can do it at a much more basic level using the MVP concept, and then gather customer feedback. Let people know. Maybe you want to have a beta group, and you can have people sign up for the to be part of the beta group, the beta testing, who gives you that feedback. And then you can start to deploy more resources to make those refinements and get this reputation for perpetually refining. So let me know. I think that's where I want to leave it today. Let me know if you got something out of this. Have you ever tried this before? Do you understand the concept of minimum viable product? Is there a different way you go about things? What are some of the risks involved that I didn't cover in this video? Leave some comments that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.